Hello everyone! So hope everyone is getting cozy today. Because we're going to be having a very cozy chat. So at least I like to think it was a cozy chat. But we are going to be talking about some more serious issues. So that may go out of the cozy territory for some of you. But we're going to try and keep it pretty chill where we can. I got some lo-fi playing in the background. You kids like lo-fi, don't you? Lo-fi hip-hop, the hippity-hoppities. So hopefully you'll be able to chill. If I'm having performance issues, I apologize. I'm a bit extra scuffed at the moment. I'm always extra scuffed. There is no normal in terms of scuffness for me. But I'm just waiting on TIefy. So we have a guest today. The aforementioned TIefyweefy, Felicity Brightlock. And she is coming on to talk about COVID and disability. This is an idea I had a while back. Basically, this is one of the videos I had promised my YouTube subscribers, I guess. I say promised. I did like a Local 58 parody videos coming soon thing. And the implication was that I'd make them, I guess, since I did make one of them. So this is the next one I'm making, I guess. So hi. This is going to be going up on YouTube, but it is going to be a stream first and foremost. And I shall be putting it up on YouTube as a video on this subject. So I might do a little bit of light editing. Like I might take out this sort of preamble of me just speaking into the void. Anyway, so yeah, Tiefy is the head of YouTubers with Disabilities. She runs that server and group. And I've known her for a little while now. I've known her through, like, obviously VTubing, mutual interest in D&D and things like that. Hello, RPG. Thanks for coming. Hey, I've got someone from the aristocracy stuck around. Long live the aristocracy. Can't seem to use stream emojis. My emotes. I can only use more. Oh no, here we go. I have them. There we go. So yeah. I should tag some peoples in on this.
Alright, I'm back. Welcome everyone. I don't know what's going on with Twitch today, but yes, we're gonna be talking about disability and
oh, that's Tiefy there.
Coronavirus today. So yeah, that's gonna be fun.
So Tiefy, will I bring you on now?
Yes.
Okay, I believe they can hear you anyway, so
I'm just probably can. It's fine.
Oh, I wasn't expecting to see you here, Miss TIefyweefy. Where'd you come from?
Well, I have the ability now to cast myself into your space, and you're now in mine, so we
That's pretty
actually get
poggers.
to be a little bit, together today, so
Aww.
that's gonna be fun.
Together,
yay.
I can't see me doing a disability stream with no one but you for all my... Sorry. I should have taught those lyrics.
I love it. That's great, I love it. I'm really happy to be here doing this with you.
Thank you.
Today. So, since this was kind of your idea, I'm gonna let you.
Yeah, it was a very big brain idea.
Doing whatever, doing however you want to start this off. I'm gonna leave that to you, and then we can just kind of trade off and do however it goes. I've never really done anything like this, quite like this before, so.
Yeah, I haven't done sort of serious streams talking about subjects, except where I did do a fundraiser that was sort of politically oriented, so we didn't end up talking a lot about trans issues and things, and disability, I believe, as well, actually, during that. So, yeah, but I haven't done a VTuber stream, sort of. I think it is good. Yesterday I was raided by Eris, the aristocracy, who is sort of an atypical VTuber.
Nice.
She's quite big, actually. She talks about, stuff, like history and things like that, and does his sort of streams of that. So it is good that we can talk about things, because there's a variety of different things you can use an avatar for, you can VTube for, and you can still be a part of the wider VTuber community, still doing the sort of more typical VTuber stuff and this, as opposed to what we have now is kind of, you have regular VTubers and then people using an avatar who are kind of more at the fringes. And I was kind of going to be
Yep.
that at first, but I just fell really hard into the rabbit hole. And I'm glad I did because there are some very nice sub communities. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of nice sub communities in the wider VTuber community. Obviously, we're having some issues at the moment with things I won't get into. But yeah.
Yeah.
And I met some wonderful people, like my friend Tiffy. Oh my goodness! Thank you,
Thanks.
Neomorai, for subscribing. Neomorai's I've known her a while now, like at least a year, from the streams I was talking about. Actually, she worked a charity stream with me. So hello, hi Ali. Thank you for subscribing. That's really poggers of you. I'm always in need of the monies for my outreach work that I do. Stop running ads and I wouldn't have needed to. So I'm not sure I can control that, I'm afraid. I might be able to have like an ad break where I can run the ads at a specific time. But yeah. That's the unfortunate thing about being affiliate, but I did really want to be affiliate because of having emojis and things like that. And obviously I can potentially make a little bit of money, not much, but just kind of maybe paying for the subs I have to other VTubers. So it's like there's this joke in the trans community that we're always passing the same $20 bill around. I think that happens in the VTuber community too, to an extent.
Probably.
So
yeah,
anyway.
So on my end, I kind of set up a new scene today. So technically on my end, we're in a library today, so that's kind of fun. I was kind of looking for an excuse to go to a different location, so I decided why not. A library seems like a good place to have a serious discussion, or more serious, but
we're just
I'm looking forward to talking about this, and
well, thank you,
just
Nirmai.
having a good discussion.
Yeah. So I'm just in my regular just chatting room because I only just got my new overlay, so I thought I might show it off a bit. Although the just chatting one is kind of a bit plainer than the main gaming one because it makes space for me to be big full size normally. So and now I am small size, so I can fit you in. So I should probably have added more fancy things. I do have my little Celtic chair in the background. That's about it. I probably should have added more.
Don't worry.
But yeah, but I really like my overlay anyway, so I thought I'd use this. In the future, I'd like to use more. I do have a few backgrounds, different places around Ireland I use, but I just wanted to use this today, and it's a really pretty overlay, so. Took a break from molding a debate to watch you at my chat in real time. Can I jump into your Discord as the only 3D person? Do you have relevant things to talk about, Nehemiah? Yeah, maybe later, yeah. You can join in later, maybe. I don't know. We didn't do it. This was just me and Tiffy arranged. I don't want to scare away our poor little Tiffy. So, but yeah, we can do that later. And later in the stream. We just got. But first, we need to like properly introduce Miss TIefyweefy. So, do you want to introduce? I gave a brief introduction of you, but do you want to big yourself up there?
Sure. So, hi, I'm TIefyweefy. Obviously, I go by Tiffy. Basically, I'm a tiefling VTuber with a disability, cerebral palsy, to be more accurate about it. One of my main reasons for wanting to become a VTuber in the first place was to bring disability and disability representation into this, community and into this creative medium, as I felt like it would be a good way to talk about these relevant disability issues, as well as share about, kind of my experience, but in a way that I was hoping more people would be able to identify with and be more personalized, instead of doing what I had done before VTubing, which was a lot of writing and a lot of disability activism in a real sense, but it didn't seem to be as effective. So I thought, you know what, why not bring that to this medium, and why not do what I can to create community for other VTubers with disabilities, which is another huge thing that I do when I'm not on Twitch, is running my Discord group for other VTubers with disabilities, to give them a space to be and have support in dealing with not only VTuber issues, but living with a disability, and many different kinds of disabilities. So that's just a brief, brief introduction.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of people with disabilities, disabled people in the VTuber community. Like even quite famous VTubers like Iron Mouse and Nyanners have talked openly
Yes.
about their disabilities. So it's quite common, but there are very few sort of VTubers that are oriented around it. Thank you, VTuber, for following me. Thank you so much. Coming a book pal and a rosebud. Yeah, I need to put those notifications over. Let me see, new follower. There we go. Actually, I'm not sure where they go.
Gamers, thanks for joining. It's nice to have you here today. I hope you'll have a nice, comfy time with us, myself and Sister Rose, as we just kind of talk about disability and the coronavirus and sort of the many facets of that. So my goal, and I think Sister Rose's goal, is to have an interesting discussion, but try to keep it as like comfy and friendly and welcoming as possible, even though we are talking about a subject matter that I know has a lot of very strong feelings around it.
So yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is that throughout the pandemic and particularly the lockdown, I constantly found myself running into things that was like, wow, disabled people weren't considered in this at all. And that just kept building up for me. And just by the time it kind of got later on in the pandemic, I was like, I have to make a video about this. I have to do something about it. Because I had the idea kind of fairly early on of making these observations, and they just kept piling on that I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I thought, well, I kind of only have so many experiences with disability myself. I'm only somewhat physically disabled. Obviously my experiences are a bit more like with autism, ADHD, and borderline personality disorder. But more recently, the last 2 years, I have developed fibromyalgia, and I have more long-term physical disabilities I've had since I was young. I have problems with my sinuses that cause all kinds of issues. Like, it can be difficult to breathe, and I get sinus headaches. And I also have a problem with my tailbone because I had 2 operations at the base of my spine when I was younger. I was born with like some kind of wonky hole down there, and that resulted in 2 pilonidal sinuses later on in life. And I'm not sure if it's related, but ever since my tailbone, I've had issues with that general area, and the last couple of months it's been particularly bad. And I actually, if you see in the preview image for this stream, hi Sonia, thanks for becoming a book pal. How's your day? I'm not sure, Sonia, but you're here now, and that's what matters. But yeah, I actually walk with a cane, and I have done for some time. Since my fiber got really bad, sometimes I sort of start to topple over when I get very tired. And one of the pressure points for my fibroids in my chest, and I find that those points often get sort of triggered strongly when I go up hills and things. So I find it easier to go up hills with a stick. And yeah, so I usually be in cane for a while, so I am a bit more visibly disabled at that. There's some things I can talk. That's good to hear, Sonia. Well, I mean, it's not good that you use a cane, but it's good that you're sharing the information with us. But yeah, it's a mobility aid, and it shouldn't be shame attached to it. I do find that I don't get a lot of sympathy for using a cane either. Like, one of the advantages using a cane for me was that it's more obvious I have some kind of physical disability. But unfortunately that doesn't translate into much. Sometimes people pick it up if I drop it. I can't listen loud due to moderation use for Jim Mama until the other mods can take over and dedicate that. That's okay. This is going to be going up on YouTube anyway. I might edit it or even just post up the whole stream. I think this is going to be a pretty productive discussion anyway. So yeah. So basically, yeah, we've both sort of compared notes. So we both have different aspects of this we're going to talk about. I think TIefy's are more, like, they're more exhaustive in some ways. Mine are maybe a little bit more specific because I was purposely not doing, you know, maybe the slightly more obvious things. So TIefy covered both those and some things that I didn't think of at all. So yeah, I think she has a lot to say about this, which is really good because I was the one who kind of came to her with it, and the fact that she was really into it was pretty good.
Well, so if that's the case, do you want to kind of go through some of your points first, and then I can kind of add mine, or how would you like to do this?
Um, well, yeah, do you want me to go first or will you go first?
Well, I think since you came to me with this idea, I would love for you to go first.
Okay, so I will, yeah, I'll start. I'm just messing with the chat to make it, go on screen a bit longer. There we go. That should work. Yeah, so yeah, I have my notes here anyway. Panels is not it. It's COVID and disability. Yeah, sorry. I actually have a surprising amount of anxiety about this. I guess because I had bad experiences in communities where I talked about issues openly, and yeah, I'm just a little bit inexperienced the last few months in this, even though I've obviously made a lot of videos in the past talking about this. But so yeah, one of the things that really got to me when the lockdown measures started coming in was the lack of seating. As someone who does need to sit down quite often because I get exhausted really easy because of my fibromyalgia, there's not an awful lot of places to sit in certain locations. Like, for example, shopping centers or malls, as you call them, they have tape all over the seats that they have, and they just have one. And it very specifically says, and this is important, for elderly use only. And I've noticed this several times where it is specifically said elderly and no mention of disability whatsoever. And that should be so incredibly obvious to people. But of course, the people making it probably say, oh, disabled people, well, they're in a wheelchair or they're not. So that's that. And that's just so thoughtless. And I never even thought about like bringing it up or complaining until I just spoke it out loud right now. But yeah, that's what showed to me the mentality behind this, and what really got me on. Yeah, that's what really got me into the idea of making this.
And I think it's interesting too that you bring that up, because even where I live, I think that is just really indicative of how society at large, who, like, people who don't live with disabilities, they tend to not think about the fact that people who are young might be dealing with bodies or conditions that make them need things like an elderly individual would need. And it's just, I think to me that's a really good example of we are considered, we're just kind of in this weird place of like, we have bodies that need extra consideration like the elderly, but because we're not elderly, most of us, people just kind of look at us and are like, what's wrong with you? Like, why should you need these accommodations? You're young. And it's like, well, because my body doesn't work the same as everyone else's. So I think that's like, it's a really good example, I think, that you brought up here about it's not what they say oftentimes, but what they don't say.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of like, because it didn't even come up to say also for use with those with disabilities, I think it just shows the mentality of like, we're an afterthought.
Or sometimes not a thought at all.
Yeah, basically, or the fact that because they don't expect us to be out and around at all. Like, that's the other way that I
Oh
would
yeah,
probably take
that's
that,
very
is
true.
to say, well, because there's a pandemic going on, like, I think that there was a huge idea that maybe people who need to use assistive devices, one, probably wouldn't want to go out because of the risk involved, but two, because there's this general idea that people with disabilities are not as, like, that they're not seen as often in social spaces. So there seems to be this mentality sometimes that we don't need to include them. But it's like a chicken and egg thing where it's like, if you don't make accommodations, we can't show up.
Yeah.
And so, since we don't show up, you don't make accommodations, but something's got to give there. And I think it just shows that society needs to do a lot more work in being aware of who else this could apply to. like not just this one demographic, not just the elderly,
Mm.
and vice versa, not just the people with disabilities, but the elderly or people with sensory differences and things like that.
Yeah. Well, the very important difference, of course, between disabled people as a demographic and elderly people as a demographic is that elderly people are considerably richer, especially when you consider like older boomers, silent gen or whatever, because they're more likely to have been able to have amassed wealth in a way that disabled
Yep.
Zoomers and millennials and even some Gen Xers won't have managed to. So that is why you see
Yep.
a lot in terms of vulnerable groups. Not that there aren't plenty of shortfalls for elderly people as well, but there is definitely a more comprehensive consideration of them when compared to disabled people who are expected to adapt to things. It's like, oh, well, you're disabled, so as long as you're just surviving, as long as you're existing. And that's sort of baked into like the whole thing with disability and that, and often the caveats they put on disability allowances and things like that. Like, we're expected to
Yep.
just exist. And that's okay. You're just existing. We're doing a good job by not killing you very quickly.
Yep.
Even when they do kill people, like in the UK, just the immense amount of, this is getting into darker territory, but just the sort of influence, like, it's easy to talk about politics in the abstract and right wing, left wing, whatever, but the real visible shape of right wing politics is culling of disabled people, and that's what
Yes.
happens. Like,
Yep.
it's not just making things slightly more difficult. If you look at the UK, the sheer numbers of people that have been killed by Tory austerity policies and the right to work scheme is immense, and that's like a democide. It's a killing off of a large portion of a demographic, and and like, there is this strong ideological consideration when it comes to disability, and like, we're not people with significant disabilities aren't people that can afford to sort of opt out of political discourse like that. And like, so it seems like a big tangent when just talking about the availability of benches, but that very much does stem from these issues.
Yeah, it most certainly does, and especially when the whole thing with the virus started, there was this whole dialogue of, socially distance and wear masks to protect the vulnerable, and I think that's a great thing because for me personally, I am in sort of more of that vulnerable demographic, not just because of my physical disability, but because of a history of asthma and a history of like some other things with my respiratory systems that would mean that me catching this virus would most certainly be death. And so it was a very interesting thing where I live to watch these stay-at-home orders go into effect and these mask mandates go into effect, and feel like they were being done to, of course, protect me and the other vulnerable populations, such as, children and the elderly and so forth. But at the same time, when those stay-at-home orders went into effect, it was kind of like, well, like, what are we supposed to do as people with disabilities? Like, I'm used to staying at home most of the time, but thank goodness I had my, support board. I had my support system living at home with me, so that when these orders went into effect, I still had someone who could do the shopping, pick up my necessities. But it just made me think of, what would it be like if I were a person who didn't have that and relied on other people to still do these things for me in the middle of a pandemic, essentially, where we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how fast it was being passed around to people. And so it was just kind of a scary time in the beginning because my caregiver was wearing masks and doing all this, but I lived in a part of my country where there was a lot of resistance to wearing masks
Yeah.
and social distancing. So I often had these fears of like, oh no, is my is my caregiver going to run into people who are like, oh, we don't like that you're wearing masks and we think that this is just a hoax and we're gonna take it out on you and then make him less able to be my lifeline, because that's what he literally was and still is, because it's still not safe really for me to go out in public spaces very much, even with a vaccine, because we still don't know what it's going to do. And that's one of the biggest things that I really had to sort of look at, is when those stay-at-home orders went into effect, I had no problem following them. And I think that in part it's due to the fact that I have always lived a more limited life. This is not something that I feel bad about necessarily, but it's just the reality of living with a more physical disability that you basically have to get used to. Well, I can only go to these certain stores or these certain areas because they've made an effort to make it accessible, and then on top of that I can only do that when I have the support available to get me out and around. So to watch a lot of these able-bodied individuals flip out and be like, no, you can't tell me where I can and can't go, and you can't tell me when and where I can go and how long I can be there for. And I'm sitting here being like, excuse you. Like, this is the kind of thing I've had to deal with most of my life. You can chill out, you know? Like, your experience of limitations automatically makes you angry, and whereas our demographic is expected to sit on it. Basically, we're expected to not get angry and just sort of accept what is, and it's like, and yet it's a lot of these able-bodied populations who look at our demographic and they're like, well, life sucks for you, you know. But then when they get just the smallest taste of it, it's interesting to see their reaction.
Yeah, you can tell by their reactions that they're not people that had necessarily felt any kind of oppression and marginalization in the way that genuinely disabled people have. And so, like, all these people have, oh, I have a note from my doctor. It says that I don't have to wear a mask. It's from my doctor. I have mouth disease and I don't have to wear a mask. And like, for people that do actually have difficulties, like, for example, autistic people, a lot of us have really bad sensory issues, and like the physical wearing of masks can be really difficult for us. But if we say that, like, we won't get taken seriously because of all these Republican weirdos and conspiracy theorists. Hi, Trippy Jing, thanks for becoming a Pukapal. So yeah, because of all these people that are just bullshitting. Oh, my dad told me not to swear in this stream. But yeah, it's gonna happen. I'm pretty mad at this stuff. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, because of people just making it up, and that makes it hard for people with actual disabilities to be taken seriously. Because I like, it is genuinely difficult for me to, like, I wouldn't be able to work a job where I have to use a mask full time. I just couldn't wear like one for 8 hours straight. It would be too much for me, again, because of my sinus issues and because of my sensory issues. But unfortunately, how people decide to combat sort of Republicans and other conspiracy nuts making up these things is, oh, I have a disability, my lungs don't work properly, I wear 3 masks and I'm doing okay. And that's just like not it. That's like, I understand why they're posting that, but it's so incredibly and this is the whole culture we have around disability, where people who are sort of more able or able to roll the punches more, they're held up as the examples. And this is something I talk about a lot in my
Yeah.
video on Temple Grandin. The autistic basket weaver is a Temple Grandin, which I'll post later. It's not super relevant to this, but a lot of it figures in. And yeah, they'll always be held up. And so because of that, it's very hard for people who do have genuine issues, because you're sort of flanked on both sides by disabled people who are trying to distance themselves from the people who are just talking crap, and then the people on the other side who are talking crap. And it's so difficult to talk about. Like, you feel afraid to even say that you have an issue with a mask. And now that people are like getting vaccinated and stuff, like, so like even when people are like well into the window of when it's like 90 something percent effective and 85+% effective at stopping the spread, people
Yeah.
still will feel weird about not wearing a mask because they don't want to be mistaken for a Republican.
And that's kind of a interesting thing that you bring up too, is that the whole idea of wearing a mask became so politicized.
Culture war issue.
That it's like, okay, first of all, number one, we have some science that backs it up, but number two, I think it's interesting that you bring up the people who may or may not have disabilities, who want to play the disability card when it's convenient, but then when a person with actual disabilities says, hey, this is a problem, we then get looked at and we get scolded and said, why can't you be more like this person who's handling it better than you? And it's
yeah, exactly.
And it's just amazing, because it's those are two different things, because there are people who want to use the disability card for that benefit of having the access or having the exclusion from needing to do certain things, like the mask mandate that you pointed out. And so as an actual like disabled person, it's kind of like, so what does that mean? That you want to use the disability when it's convenient for you, but when it's not, and we actually confront you on these issues, then it's a problem. Then it's the disabled people not just being happy with whatever you're giving us. And this whole vaccine thing was not accessible really to our demographic. I feel like it wasn't, because even where I live, there was this thing where they're like, okay, Tiffy, because you have a disability and you have other medical conditions, you're gonna be in the first wave of people who are allowed to get vaccinated. And I think that's an important step, but I think there were a lot of things as far as accessibility of getting that vaccine for me, and knowledge about getting vaccines and having disabilities. I felt like that was very sort of underdeveloped, and I get that people were doing this as fast as they could with as much information as they had. But for instance, when I called my physician and I said, hey, listen, I want to get vaccinated, but I have a history of really intense reactions to medications, foods, plants, like all of these things. I'm really sensitive to a bunch of stuff that I might not even know I'm sensitive to until after it happens. So I was talking with my physician and saying, can you give me any guidance whatsoever on the best vaccine for me? And they said, well, Tiffy, it doesn't really matter which one you get. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
you're supposed to be able to guide me either way. And I just felt like that wasn't true. I felt like there has to be some information that doctors really should be given if I'm even gonna be a patient of theirs, where I constantly have to say, I have disabilities, I have muscle tension, I have other things going on in the background in my body that no normal person has. Can you advise me on maybe some things to do with these various vaccines that maybe with my cerebral palsy I should pay attention to? And for instance, the whole issue of potential blood clots
Yeah.
was particularly scary to me because I already have some mobility issues and some blood flow issues. So even trying to talk to my doctor about that, my physician, and having them say, well, Tiffy, it doesn't matter, just take one. So I ended up getting vaccinated anyway, but it was just really disheartening
Yeah.
to go there and try to be a good advocate for myself and have the medical system say it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That it is what it is.
Yeah, I have similar issues because again, I have chronic pain and I have days where if I'm busy, I'll be wiped by the end of the day and for the next few days. And so having the vaccine on top of that, and I know that especially the second shot can really knock people out. And I would also like to know which is the most effective. And similarly, I have elevated blood pressure. So I potentially could be at risk for clotting, so I would like to know about that too. That's apparently less of a direct risk, but all the other thing like the exhaustion and things like that, just being totally knocked out, I'm really concerned about that. And if like I might need someone to look after me for a day and I don't have access to those kind of services necessarily. And again, like you're saying, like the way people just expect you to be able to access things and all that, the expectation of accessibility they never bother to provide, that's a really huge issue. And again, like going back to talking about, like, it reminds me of trans healthcare a lot. There's a very similar thing where a lot of the effects of things weren't properly researched for a long time, or how this will benefit someone, like progesterone, for example. You get a lot of sort of mixed vibes from doctors asking about it, and that, so sort of for any sort of outsider group when it comes to medical issues, that tends to happen an awful lot, where it's such an afterthought, even when the group is as sizable as people with disabilities in general. This is pretty wild. Yeah, I just want to read one of the comments too. True, I was talking to an anti-vaxxer at work today. He thought it was mad that I got vaccinated, but I'm still pretty happy about it. I'm still waiting to be vaccinated. We do have an issue in Ireland where a lot of people who should be in vulnerable categories aren't getting counted. For example, only people with like the worst form of asthma have been vaccinated so far as I know, and the rest will likely only be vaccinated in their age categories, and that's pretty incredible for me. Like, considering the amount of times they've done like minor revisions to our lockdown statuses and things like that, they could definitely do like little revisions for the vaccine list and all that. And like, I think a lot of them are pretty rigid though, and like I have elevated blood pressure and other problems that should really qualify me to get in earlier than my age, but I'm being completely disregarded by the system. Yeah, I have low vitamin D as well. I have problems making vitamin D, so COVID could be particularly dangerous for me, and I'm terrified. And also, I do work, like outreach work. Like, I look after kids, and I can't avoid physical contact with them sometimes. And I'm not recognized as that. The reality is that a lot of people, especially women and minorities, do a lot of unpaid labor caring for people, and that can bring them into direct contact with people in a way that they can't avoid. And that's not regarded anything at all. And that, obviously, again, is a very huge issue when it comes to disability, because the family that I look after has a disabled mother, and so I have to be there sometimes to be the semi-functioning body, even though I'm disabled myself. And yeah, and there's no way to like really say, oh, listen, doctor, I'm looking after these people, can you push me up the list a bit? Because it doesn't really work like that, and it kind of should, in my opinion. There should be like easy special cases and things like that. Like, I get that they're trying to roll out as quick as possible and all that, and it's a logistical nightmare, blah blah blah, but I feel so much of this could have been like, it's not that hard for doctors to just bump people up their personal lists if there's a little less centralized control in that regard. I don't know. And all of these are like systems that should have been put in place anyway. Like, talking about general systems, like when you were saying that you weren't sure about the effects of it and that you had bad reactions to medications. This is one of the reasons why it is important that people get vaccinated for things like flu and all that as much as they can, because of the people
Yeah.
that can't, and the people that can't get the vaccines are also the ones that are likely to be really screwed over by it. So it's really
Yep.
important that people who can get them do. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to give the hell to people until vulnerable people have the protection. Yeah, it just seems that they only counted certain disabled classes as like disabled enough to get it and or affected enough to get it, and anyone else was just lumped in with the normal ones. And I would argue that people with significant mental health issues like myself, because I really struggled during lockdown. Obviously everyone did, but people with specific mental health issues, as far as I know, there was zero consideration for that as well. And again, with mental health and invisible disabilities in general, that just goes completely out the window.
Yeah, and I think too what you bring up is something that I think dealing with this pandemic really has highlighted, not only just in general for people with disabilities, but as like a system-wide problem, which is how we evaluate disability, and based on that evaluation, the kind of help or the kind of access we provide.
Mm,
And I think it's just really interesting that a lot of people, like you were saying, may not have been considered quote unquote disabled enough
mm,
to get in the first wave
mm,
because of however they were determining what vulnerable enough meant. So
mm,
I think this might be an opportunity that we have to say, well, maybe disability needs to be viewed as more of a
mm,
uh, spectrum of a whole host of things
mm,
that would be considered disabled enough to not only count as part of the demographic, but count as someone who needs these services or needs the access. Because it's unfortunate that there is this view that says, well, because on one hand, I think people assumed that, the vaccine was going to be accessible to me
mm,
simply because I was in the first wave or two. And yeah, there were some ways that they tried to make this accessible, but in other ways they really kind of separated who would have access to this or not. Like there was a more accessible, less busy place to go get your vaccinations, and that's initially where I tried to schedule an appointment. But because they were so unresponsive to my request, saying I use an assistive device, I have these other things, I'd rather not be in a crowd of people
mm,
to get this vaccine, because they weren't responsive enough, I couldn't use the option that was considered more accessible, and therefore it might as well not have been there at all. Or some of my other friends, I have one who's a veteran who has a lot of like physical and health and mental issues
mm,
due to his time in the service, but because they don't want to document him as having disabilities because he's
mm.
functional enough,
Yeah.
he doesn't get the supports that I think would really help him as far as even being able to have access to the vaccine, because he
Mm,
does have joint problems, he has problems with exhaustion, and yet they say, well, no, you're not disabled enough to need those services. Or
mm,
another friend of mine who became disabled due to hereditary issues, he he had to fight for a very long time to even get a power wheelchair, because his particular hereditary disease was not considered a official disability or some such thing.
Mm.
And so even he had some difficulty initially getting any kind of services, and he's still not eligible for care, so his parents still thankfully are around to do that for him. But even just trying to get access to vaccines and stuff, I think he ended up getting his at like a Walgreens or something, because that was gonna be the most accessible to him, even though all these places tried to say, hey, we're accessible. He ended up having to make that different choice for himself.
Well, honestly, like I said earlier, there's a singular source of all of this, and I'm going to get political again. It is very much the right-wing conservative ideology that people have to prove they deserve something. So it's not necessarily that all of them give no heed to disability whatsoever. It's just that, unfortunately, weeding out imaginary fakers is vastly more important than caring about disabled people. So, so whatever little empathy they might have just gets totally drowned out by that. And it's this idea of chasing fakers and it's the same with like any kind of welfare or anything, making the system so much harder and so much more difficult for people, just because there might be some people that would abuse the system. And this applies to lots of things too, like DRM even in games, or even like the TSA and all that as well. So because some people might abuse the system, you have to mess over everyone. And of course the numbers of people actually doing it are very low even before these measures come in. So and all that kind of comes from that idea that you have to gatekeep these things so harshly.
Yep.
And all of that, so people are so obviously, like with COVID, there are some actual considerations in terms of they have limited resources and planning and things like that, but they are definitely inheriting that mentality that they've had with disability and other things for so long. And it's that you have to prove that you deserve this, and the constant sort of suspicion of people who are disabled. Like I constantly feel like people are judging me for using a cane because I don't obviously have a problem with either of my legs most of the time. And that is ingrained in people, and it is purely, and again, like what you were saying about your veteran friend, like not having it just like always functioning enough and all this sort of fun. Again, that's exactly like that right to work thing that killed a lot of disabled people in the UK. And it is just this ideology of a pure ideology of forcing people into work where they can and just pushing and just disregarding people that don't fit a particular mold. Like when they have a few people that are like obviously disabled in a way that's good for them, they'll lift up some of them, not all of them, to make themselves feel better and to look like they're doing something, while a whole load of equally disabled people get screwed over. And it is this very strong, and this is what's worrying for people who have long-term COVID now after this, who have long-term disabilities with their lungs and other issues, because COVID can cause all kinds of problems. That we haven't shifted our mentality much. Like, there's been all this thing about people supporting each other, and let's show out for the medical support people and all this. But unless we change that fundamental ideology, we're going to be stuck with these problems, and we're going to be ill prepared. Like, I often talk about how like autism is incompatible with capitalism in general, but that's true of most disabilities. Even when you. Like, people go according to their own rhythms, and the systems that we have, specifically like the modern neoliberal systems, tend to be like, we should be making more progress in terms of disabilities, but a lot of the time we're making less because we're making certain things more and more rigid. That makes it a lot harder for people to be flexible. Now there have been like flexible models for certain things introduced, but often they've been co-opted and used by like things like 0-hour contracts and all that sort of thing. So things have been like, disabled people need options, and they need to not be shoved into little boxes where they either are very disabled or not, or we have these jobs, like, and this is a big thing, right, where they have jobs specifically with supports for autistic people or disabled people, and you look at the fine print and it turns out those are only there for like the first 5 weeks and then you're on your own and stuff like that. I'm really skeptical of any like autism to job things, or they're generally rubbish.
That's another difficult thing too, because with this whole thing with the pandemic,
thanks, Sandra, I'll have some water.
And the coronavirus is this whole concept of like, well, what does it mean to have access? What does it mean to be productive?
Yeah.
What does it mean to have meaningful work?
Yeah, exactly.
When you are disabled, and there's also an unprecedented pandemic, and there's part of me that wants to be optimistic, let's say, about maybe the opportunities to change the way that we view the worth and value and capability of those with disabilities, because up until now there has been this huge emphasis that you are only able to work if you are able to do it in person, and if you are able to do like the physical requirements of a job, even if it's a mostly office job. Like, the reason why they have a lot of those, like, physical requirements, like must be able to lift up to such and such amount of weight, or must be able to sit, stand, twist, walk up and down stairs multiple times a day, whatever, all these things. It's when people used to say to me, well, Tiefy, you could just go get like a job in an office somewhere. I had to tell them, what you don't think about is it wouldn't matter if I had managerial skills coming out of my ears. What people don't understand is just because we have like rights as disabled people, and we supposedly have rights afforded to us when we go look for a job, what a lot of people don't understand is, unless people commit to being less ableist in positions of authority when hiring, it's not going to matter if I have the skills. They could just as well say, well, Tiffy, because you can't lift and you can't move and you can't
even lift,
bend and twist, then we don't have to offer you this job. Never mind that 80% or 90% of the job would be me sitting there at a computer doing X, Y, or Z. So I think it's interesting that the pandemic kind of just came in and said, hey, this idea that you have of like what is considered useful or valuable work and how that work gets done, I'm kind of optimistic that the pandemic might get some of these belief systems to say, wait a minute, if we're moving online a lot anyway, if there are people with disabilities who would like to work and who would like to do things online and do things digitally, like content creation or even becoming a VTuber, I think it would be nice if some of these systems recognized that these are valuable and necessary ways that people with disabilities could meaningfully contribute, without then saying, well, because you're working, you're no longer disabled and therefore don't need the supports. It's like, no, I'm still gonna have my disability whether I'm working or not, but it's just we need to be so much more flexible with it.
Oh, sorry, I'm having a brain I have brain issues at the moment. I had something very profound to say, and then I just got totally distracted by something. Let me try and reverse my steps and see where I was. I was going to make a point with regards to autism and work, I think. Actually, no, I have a very interesting story in terms of intersectionality and disability. I have a friend who is Black South African, who's a woman. The language they speak in Black Panther, but she has problems finding work. Like, she did work briefly as a cleaner, and she found that, like, as a Black woman, with like a visibly Black African name, a lot of the time that those are like the jobs available, like that are somewhat easier to get, and it is like that sort of like racist hiring practices basically, because she did try to apply, like, she's qualified and she's intelligent and capable obviously, but that just gets disregarded, and so you add this extra dimension of her having like chronic back pain or whatever, that sort of intersectional issue, and then it sort of really compounds it. So people who are met with more than one issue And obviously trans people as well have real problems getting, and that's why we often, because the intersection trans and disability especially is one of the reasons why we do sex work and things like that a lot of the time. Like you talk to so many trans femmes, and like I'd say at least a quarter of us must have done camming or something at some stage. And it's, yeah, and oh yeah, I remember now. You're talking about valued work, and this is one thing that again I talk about in my autism video about Temple Grandin. Yeah, a lot of the time it's not that we can't work or be inverted commas productive. It's that this idea of productivity under like capitalism, neoliberalism especially, tends to be very, like somewhat narrow, and it's basically based on certain types of jobs and certain types of skill sets. And like you look at like how a lot of the most essential jobs are the most undervalued ones, like nurses and all that, for starters. So even looking at that, everything's topsy-turvy. And then at things like how when fields become male dominated as opposed to female dominated, like what happened to programming, for example, the wages tend to go up. Because so feminine labor is inherently devalued, and of course caring for disabled people is often regarded as feminine labor, because carers are more likely to be women or feminine people. And so that's an issue that figures into it as well. And oh my goodness, I lost it. See, one of my other disabilities is ADHD, so I lose my train of thought constantly. But yeah, value, yeah. And we're talking about VTubing as well. Like, yeah, like entertain. Like this is one thing that people have been devaluing, like artists, even when like we're consuming various forms of art, like tons of music, tons of like Netflix and YouTube or whatever, and that gets disregarded. And a lot of the time, like disabled people do have particularly interesting insights and are more likely, like any marginalized group seems to be more likely to become an artist, but are often have a harder time making it. And of course, like when it comes to like provisions as well, like being an artist is very hard. It's been really messed up, like the career paths available to most artists, and everything's just gotten so hyper competitive and so corporate, and like it's very hard to make a living as an artist, and that has shut a lot of people out, because often to make as an artist you have to put in far too much work. Like a long time ago, like in the 60s or 70s at least, obviously things were screwed up in other ways, but you were more likely to be able to just like be good at music or have a good thing going on and to like make something of yourself. And now it's really goddamn difficult for a number of reasons. And so that really shuts out to a lot of disabled people, especially disabled people who can't perform, can't sleep, kip on floors, going on tours and things like that. And that shuts a lot of things out. And even in VTubing, right? Like VTubing is wonderful for people with disabilities, but then people have to go and infect it with hustle culture. And if we're being honest, a lot of the people at top are partly responsible for this. Like, as great as Maury Calliope is, I do think it was irresponsible of her to feed into that narrative. I don't think she meant to, but I think as soon as she saw the sort of people that were defending her and the sort of people that were weaponizing off with their heads and things like that, she should have said something. But I think because of that, the whole hollow life control and all that, it's more difficult. And that was a really difficult thing to talk about, because like there are valid points there as well with people who do spend a lot of time dilly-dallying and like not pushing forward with themselves, and that was sort of more her intent, that a lot of people don't have the confidence. And there is this whole nasty underbelly, and it is the same people who tend to bring up drama, and I say drama, but the same people that are behind the current issues that we can't really talk about because they're a bit too much. It is often the sort of 4chan-ish hollow fans and people like that. But yeah, so even VTubing has been infected with this mentality, and it makes it a lot more difficult for disabled people. And of course, some of us have managed to do very well, like Yanners and Mousy. But not everyone's disability manifests in such a way that, like, for me, I'm not like as disabled as a lot of the more visibly disabled VTubers and stuff like that. Like, I'm not as disabled as, inverted commas, as disabled as Mousy, for example. But I also have very low constitution for doing streams overall. I love to do it, but there's only so much of it I can do. And unfortunately, again, especially under the sort of systems we live in, people will be upheld as these glorious examples of like the Temple Grandins of the world or whatever. And where I kind of came up with the idea of the autistic basket weavers of Temple Grandin, again, it goes back into this idea of productivity and how they used to get mentally ill people in institutions to weave baskets just so they were doing something with their hands, basically, to do, sure, you might as well be doing something, be productive, like. And I think sometimes they just make money off the disabled people then selling them. But anyway, Yeah, so that's like it's that sort of mentality that just infests everything, and yeah, it comes from a single point, but it manifests in multiple ways. I'm sure there are other issues with disability in COVID that I haven't touched on that aren't just capitalism, but that's one of the things I've noticed the most. Yeah, of course, some of these issues will always be here because people are always kind of suspicious of people who are different in some way, but yeah.
I think too one of the most important, I think it's good that you bring up that you don't, because your constitution is different. You don't really have the same energy that other people might to do streams and things, and this is one of the reasons that I ended up creating my VTubers with Disabilities group and wanting to bring more attention to it, because I think, and I think this was especially kind of highlighted because of the pandemic going on, is that there's a lot of things with disability where your inability to have the same stamina is seen as like a moral flaw, like a moral weakness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yours.
And that is that ideology again, that play.
Like, rather than saying, no, literally, I have things that make me exhausted. It's not because I'm a lazy person that I can't produce as much as other people. And so I think it's one of the big reasons why I made my community, to just say, to have a space to say to others, like, you see all these other VTubers being online all day, every day, and of course I'm over exaggerating, but you kind of, with these other VTubers, you can see that a lot of them are streaming a lot, and they're on Twitch a lot, or on YouTube a lot. And there's this idea that it's like, well, if you're not doing that, you must be lazy or you must be failing at something.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to have a counter dialogue to that and say, well, but we are dealing with other things that, for the most part, without having VTubing as an outlet to talk about them, most people in society would say, well, we don't want to hear about your issues, but we still want to blame you for them as if it's a moral shortcoming of yours.
Yeah.
Rather than something we should be paying attention to and maybe developing supports around that, so that if you are dealing with chronic pain or chronic fatigue or both, or something about your disability that really saps your stamina in a way that it doesn't for other people, that we recognize that the same way that we would with any other kind of illness.
Yeah.
To say, like, it's not because they have no motivation. It's not because they have no desire to create. It's because whatever you're seeing as their disability, it has other manifestations that are contributing to this outside view that they don't do anything productive. They do, but you might just not see it. Or it might not be as often, because maybe the disability that you have doesn't affect your stamina in the same way, but maybe in other areas of your life that people don't see, you are similarly affected, but just because society in general looks at you and says, oh, you're productive, then they don't blame you for it. And like you've said, I think we also need to, not just for people with disabilities, but like everyone really, I think we really need to redefine like what a work week looks like and how many hours per week anyone should be expected to work, but particularly people with disabilities who might not be able to work 40 hours a week consistently.
And the thing is, there's no reason to work 40 hours a week in most roles. Like, obviously, we do have issues in terms of, like, healthcare and nursing and things like that. You do have to work longer. But again, that's a lot of the time because those jobs aren't very attractive. They aren't well paid. The training is not always the best. But yeah, so we don't need to work 40-hour week. It's a relic. Like 30 hours is the absolute maximum for most jobs, and like there should be more options for disabled people who want to just work a little bit. And like I would love to have a part-time job, but again it's very difficult. And going back as well to like working from a distance, because I actually spend a lot of time with my parents, because to be honest, sometimes I just can't look after myself very well. Hopefully after the
Yeah.
pandemic, and maybe I can get back to working on myself and my independence. But I'm mostly independent, but there are times when I would not be as functional if I couldn't just go back to my parents for a while. And unfortunately, my parents are not at all equipped to deal with my various disabilities, emotional issues, and things like that. So that's an issue in of
Oh no.
itself. But yeah, so because of that, that's one of the things that makes it very difficult for me to get a part-time job. Not that most jobs suit me anyway. And there's this whole thing where again, like what we were saying about how people are realizing how much a lot of this is made up in terms of you having to be in the office and you having to do these certain things. And we're realizing that is not just like exaggerated, but in some cases completely and utterly fabricated, and it's ridiculous. And I feel like they're already trying
Yeah.
to like just bluff their way out of this and get people back to, like, they're putting up all these op-eds of, oh, why the workplace is so important and workplace culture. And like, yeah, to an extent it, like having a means to like deal with the bleakness of work by having people to socialize, that's great for a lot of people. For a lot of other people it is
Yeah.
not. And of course part of the reason, and this is weird because it's not even productivity in some ways. Again, I talked about the very warped, that it's not just productivity in general, but a very warped version of productivity that these things, because a lot of time they just want you there. They want you just sitting there on the company dime or whatever, they say.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they just want to suck up people's free time. It's like it's feeding off them parasitically. And now we're like seeing some of the biggest cracks we have in sort of this corporate culture and the 40-hour work week and work. Yeah, it's and this commuting just takes so much time from people as well, and people are realizing that more and more, and contributes so much to global. Like even if we could say 30% out of it, that'd be huge, and would actually be one of the
And I
biggest.
think I think too, like people with disabilities, like commuting and transport is like a
Yeah, yeah,
huge reason for me why even getting a job after college was difficult, because I'm
yeah.
like, well, how am I going to work the transport system enough regularly to do that? And I think what's really what's really hard for me though about like this idea of even trying to work while having a disability, even being a streamer and things, is because there are things in the rules, at least in my part of the world, that even if you are not getting paid for hours to do something, they will count those hours against an able-bodied person. And if you work enough hours doing something you enjoy and you report it, that is the same as being financially like able to support yourself. And it's like, what kind of ass backwards policy is that? Like, who else gets evaluated for hours that they're putting in to build something for themselves being counted the same as paid work? And it just kind of makes me want to talk about like this whole like becoming a VTuber, and especially like one of the people that really inspired me, which was this VTuber that used to be on VR chat a lot by the name of Bewitch or Bewitching. And basically they went through this whole thing where, because they became so successful at this, they actually had to go make the choice to get off the disability benefit because
Oh
they
yeah.
were able to support themselves by doing this. And basically the office said to this person, you have a choice. You can either give up on your streaming and keep your benefits, or you keep streaming and you have to give them up. And one of the things that really inspired me was that Bewitch said, well, screw that. I'm going to keep doing streaming because I love to do it, and this is the first time in a long time that I've been able to support myself financially even with my disability. So it was actually because I saw that it actually made me want to get into VTubing in the first place, because I thought, only very brave, but that's also kind of like a cool thing, that if you become successful enough, it could be a way that you become financially independent. But it just makes me wonder, like, if she had not been as financially successful, but she was putting all these hours into it and had reported that to those government offices, then it might have been a whole different story. Just because these policies, like you were saying, they have this whole mentality of like, if you can do anything at all, then why aren't you working? And it's like, but it needs to be more flexible. Like, my body is rigid enough as it is. I need policies that are flexible, because these disability issues are not rigid, but to treat people like their unpaid time, learning a skill or building an audience in this case, to treat that like it is the same as paid work, and having the threat of, if you're even trying to build something of value, then you risk losing these supports. And I'm just thinking to myself, the amount might have had to reinvent themselves and find things to do during quarantine. Can you imagine what would happen if able-bodied people were treated the same way?
Yeah.
Like, oh, because you decided to learn a language, or you decided to learn how to, fabricate a birdhouse or something, that we're going to count that as you having worked hours, never mind that you didn't get paid for making that birdhouse or learning that language, because it's not at a level to which you can even monetize it yet, to even make a living off of it, And so, like, I think that's a huge thing with, like, work and disability and this pandemic, is like, we need to get real about what it is we're defining as work, and what it is we are defining as valuable expenditure of energy, like, as a human race, but also as people with disabilities, where it's like, how are you going to count something that has no monetary value yet, but then talk about things like hobbies and volunteer work for able-bodied people as legitimate pastimes, like during a pandemic, say, but then, like, turn around and say to the disability community, you can't even volunteer, because if you do too many hours of that, you're seen as too functional, and we can't have that, because you're having too good of a life, and we can't tolerate that from you.
God, I'm glad I haven't been caught with that, because I do a fair bit of... I only have so much energy to do it, but, like, I guess what I do outreach work, like, maybe only, like, 12 hours a week or so, but I'm kind of on call constantly, and I'm often doing things like arranging taxis and things like that. But yeah, and it's funny, because that's not regarded as important labor. Again, it's feminized labor carrying anyway, so that's one of the reasons why. And there's so much unpaid labor in general that women and femme bodies do. And yeah, so it is kind of funny to me that they look at someone VTubing and said, oh, you're too functional to... Oh, God. And, like, that should be a good thing, though. If they want, like, inverted commas, productivity, they're doing something good. So it's so warped.
And that's what I'm saying, is, like, why is it so twisted? If somebody is putting in the time and they're contributing, like, we should have support systems that allow them to build an audience, and without the financial component, because like you were bringing up with with some of the policies and stuff, I often say to people in sort of I'm not really joking when I say it, but I say it in sort of a joking manner, is that I say, well, my biggest disability, apparently, according to these systems, is poverty. And it's because they force poverty on you as like the bigger thing that you have to demonstrate, rather than putting the focus on the disability itself. Because for me to even have the assistance from my male caregiver that I have, my support bard, I have to prove on a yearly basis that I am poor enough to deserve the care that I receive, rather than having it be my disability makes me worthy of this care. No matter if I were earning my own money or not, sure, I would probably have to add to my own care services at that point with my income. But it's ridiculous that there's such emphasis on how much money do you have, and that literally, even for food stamps, which, you know, during a pandemic is like something a lot of people needed to be on, but I've heard like horror stories basically of this person who was in the office trying to get food stamps, and because they had one of their friends had given them like a $20 bill or something, like $20 or $40 or something like that. So they had just been given that money. So then they go into the DHS office, or the government office, to try to get the food stamps. But because they had accepted that money from a friend right before going into the office, it was immediately counted as resources that they had to buy food. Never mind, this person had obviously been struggling to feed themselves. So when they went to apply for that, the people were like, no, you have $40 in cash. You don't need food stamps. And the guy was like, but my friend just gave this to me. Like, I need help, like, filling my cupboards. And they're like, sorry, you have $40 in cash. We can't. You have too much money. You know, and I might be exaggerating these numbers. A bit, but basically, that is the kind of stuff that happens.
So
which is,
Jeff Bezos doesn't have too much money,
all,
but 40 bucks.
Yeah.
40 bucks guy has too much money. Oh God.
You know, and I could be wrong about like the limits and stuff, but it's ridiculous because they're so worried about these financial amounts, like that you have on your person, that don't represent life for you in a day-to-day scenario in which you might not have that donation. And so it's like half of these services can't decide whether it's a charity or, you know, debt collection. And I can never decide which. It's like, are you trying to help people when they actually need help to get food or support systems, or is this a circus? Because if it is, I should learn how to juggle, you know? I should learn how to walk the tightrope then, because it's like, you can't say you're here for helping people and then have these ridiculous arbitrary caps that you're going to put into effect even if the donation was like a one-time thing. And they're suddenly ineligible.
Yeah, I'm lucky where I live, we're not as strict on those sort of things. And they have like clearly defined limits of how much you can earn while still on disability. I think it's 100 and something. So I'm fairly set in terms of VTubing because I don't think I'd ever be earning more than 100 a week. But there's still issues with that. But one of the other big things with disability is also when you get married, you can lose your allowances. And like people talk about equal marriage and all that. And yeah, and obviously like in terms of a pandemic and all that, and like having a partner who, like, people are passing away. And quite a lot of people died during this pandemic. So people that were avoiding getting married because of losing disability allowance may lose rights to their that's or even not even passing
Yeah.
away, just being sick in hospital sometimes. Yeah. I do want to kind of bring a little bit back into more directly into COVID. I want to kind of wrap up this, and then I'll bring my friend Ali in for the sort of after stream sort of kickback, I guess. So yeah, some of the other things I wanted to bring up or that came up as well is transport, but also the lack of accessibility in transport during COVID. Like they have less buses and less places available
Yep.
to encourage social distancing. Actually, the first time I went on a train during the pandemic, it was way packed out and they weren't enforcing it at all, which is the opposite extreme, and that was terrifying. Jesus.
Oh no.
But yeah, the lack of like having less buses, like disabled people have to rely more on public transport because A, we're poor, so probably don't have cars. B, a lot of time disabilities means we can't drive cars. And C, a lot of us can't walk as much as others, so we have to use buses more. And D, we have to get to appointments and things like that more, or to people who might be supporting us in some way. So that was a big issue for me. And one of the other things I can't. Yeah. Oh yeah, and routes being blocked off as well. Like in the shopping center I go to, the back route that I used to go out is blocked, and I often like I drink a lot of sparkling water because I have this weird condition with my throat related to my sinuses, and it's one of the only things that kind of makes it feel okay. And so I can carry a lot of heavy things when I go shopping, and I have to go all the way around the shopping center, the long route, instead of the way out the back because of the one way system. And that is like a lot of these things aren't necessarily avoidable, but there's still things people don't consider when it comes to disabled people. And another sort of big disability thing is executive functioning as well, like having to remember to do things like wash your hands, wear a mask, and a lot of time there can be an awful lot of additional phases to doing things, which can make me get very
Yep.
stressed out. So that's
Yep.
another thing that's not really considered a lot. Just and the whole COVID pandemic in general is overwhelming for a lot of people. And that's overwhelming for everyone,
Yep.
but when people say, "Oh, sure, isn't everyone in a bad situation?" Like, for some of us, it's just, especially autistic people who often like have a particular rhythm they go to, and it's just totally disrupted. It's yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's definitely. I think it just kind of shows how we really need to increase our awareness of like how these things really do impact people and routines, especially, um, and how access plays into that. But I think what I also want to bring up is the whole fact that the coronavirus does have some lingering
mm,
debilitations. Like it's giving people lingering conditions,
mm,
right? And so it's sort of it's a really difficult thing to navigate, but that's why I kind of want to bring it up here kind of near the
mm,
end, which is there are so many people who even when recovered from the virus, they now have physical conditions that are going to be with them for maybe the rest of their lives, and we don't even have enough data yet
yeah,
to see how this is going to affect them in the long term, and not just like the virus itself, but those people who had to be on a ventilator, or those people who had near death experiences, or anything like that. There's a whole lot of people with disabilities, in my opinion,
mm,
out there now because of this virus. Because when you get it, it's like a lot of people are gonna find themselves fundamentally changed. And so I look at these same systems that want to like be very austere and very sort of wanting to check whether people are defrauding them or not. And
yeah,
I look
I
at these systems and I'm like, well, the thing is, we have potentially a lot more people who are in need of service, who
yeah,
are in need of care, and who are now going to have disabilities that they are not accustomed to dealing with. So I would hope that maybe as not only the disability community, but the community at large would say, maybe this is a good time to
mm,
reevaluate the availability and uh, the ease with which we are giving these services to people and what value we are placing on these disabled lives in general, because I think outside of the pandemic, I think there's this general view that disabled lives aren't worth as much.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
no, very
even
much
more the
so.
case. That's even more the case when you add in other layers like identifying as queer or being a person of color with a disability, like some of my friends are. And but it just makes me wonder, so we have millions of people who became infected, and we have like millions of people who are recovered. And I've heard rumors that there are support groups all over online for coronavirus survivors. And it just got me thinking, well, I think as a demographic, as people with disabilities, if we're not already doing outreach to that group, we should, because
Yeah,
I think we would be the more, I don't want to say qualified, but we would
yeah.
be the more empathetic
Yeah, we have experience
group.
being screwed over by the system, so.
Yes, and we also have experience of people telling us, well, your life is not worth living as it is. Wouldn't you rather be dead? And in this case,
Oh,
if you
God.
survived the freaking virus, I'm like, I want you to feel like there's a reason for you to have lived. I don't want the rest of society to be telling you the virus should have killed you. Like, I want to see this pandemic change that mindset to
Yeah.
say, even if your family member has disabilities after this, aren't you glad that they're alive? Like like at that point, don't you think you'd be offended if someone went over to your family member and said, well, the coronavirus should have taken them, because they're disabled now. And I'm like, I think we need to change that, because I think that even if you survive something like a virus, I think that there should be people out there who support you in finding out what kind of life you can live now. And I think that has huge implications for our demographic, that is often the first one to be looked at by other demographics and saying, well, if I were you, I would not be alive. If I were you and I had to deal with that disability, I would rather be in the ground. So it would be my hope that we could maybe spin that around somehow because of this pandemic and say, well, we're lucky that they're alive, and we're happy that they're
Yeah.
alive, and we want them to have more opportunities, even so I would love to have that be a discussion, that the survivors of the virus and our disability demographic could talk to them and say, you are freaking badass for having survived. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not. And maybe we can work together and like have a renaissance for our demographic and the other ones that intersect with us.
Yeah.
And have a kind of renaissance to say this would be the time to change it. And change the dialogue and change the mindset. But as you said in the beginning of this, the mindset is very hard to change.
Yeah. It's so ingrained in people. So I guess that's a good place to like sort of yeah, that's a good kind of capstone almost, or wind up point. So yeah, basically the mentality does need to change, and COVID should have taught us an awful lot of things. As awful as it was, that it maybe necessarily hasn't, and we're going to be forced with a lot of realities going forward now, as we were during the pandemic. So we're going to need to reconstitute our human kindness and all that sort of thing, and we need to think about how we're changing it. Like just looking at all the people that have been disregarded, like you mentioned your veteran friend and all that, and like people love to like like people love inspiration porn when it comes to disabled people, and that's a lot like how
Yes, they
people
do.
say support our troops when they're shooting brown people in the Middle East, but then oh no, you're out on the street and you're missing your leg, and oh dear, oh well, I have to go to I have to go to Olive Garden. That's it's.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah, all this bougie ass attitudes towards disabilities. Yeah, we need to do better.
Yes. Yes, we do, but that's one of the reasons that, I know I'm not the only one in the VTuber community doing, their disabled warrior thing, but that is one of the reasons that I'm so glad I got to do this collaboration with you, and the reason
Thank you.
why
Me too.
I try to uplift people as much as I can because it's important, and we do need to be there for each other and get these messages out.
Sorry, I'm just waiting on my friend who I was going to bring in at the end of this, but she's streaming herself, so maybe I'll pop into her stream and bother her a second. Yeah, I'm gonna listen in on her stream. Bother her. Oi, mate! Oi, mate!
Oi!
Right. What are you doing, you geezer? Yeah?
So I appreciate everyone who was able to join me on my side today. I know I wasn't as interactive with chat as I normally am, but I hope you all enjoyed your time anyway, and I appreciate you hanging out on my side. Anyway, even with some of the technical difficulties I was having. And if any of you guys have any more questions or comments, I would love to hear them. So go ahead and send me a note on Twitter or on Discord, because I'd love to know what you think. And I might even do a little more content around these kinds of things in the future if you enjoy them.
Yeah, I'm going to do more things like that. It is important to... We covered a lot of things aside from just COVID, but I'm sure there are plenty of subjects we can go through in future as well.
I think so too. I think that, there's a lot of things around disability that do need more attention and that need people who are willing to kind of go there, because I think there's too much of a temptation to play nice, I guess. I don't know what word to use, but I think I've noticed, like just as an afterthought, I've noticed that a lot of people who do disability work on Twitter and on other platforms want to use the term like advocacy because it's nicer.
Yeah, as opposed to liberation.
Yeah, or like warrior or something, and and so I understand that advocacy is an accurate word, but I also feel like it's used by a lot of people in our demographic to be like, oh, see, I'm nice, I'm not spilling over the apple cart, and I think for me,
my apples.
My apples, how dare you? How dare you disrupt my order and my small box? How dare you? But I also think, like, moving forward, even with, like, vaccines and stuff, I am gonna keep wearing, like, a mask when I can, and I'm gonna keep social distancing when I can, because, like I said to a family member, I said, we don't know what this thing can do yet. We don't.
Yeah.
We wanna think that it's over and done with, and that yay vaccine. I'm like, nope. This virus knows what it's doing. It has the ability to evolve. These viruses are notorious for changing their strategies. So I'm of the mindset that even as we move forward into the vaccinated era, we can't act like you know, that we can't act like we've got this thing figured out. Because I think, as you said, we still need to probably overhaul as an entire community,
Yeah.
like even worldwide. We really need to look at this and be like, well, I know we were looking at this in the heat of the pandemic, but it's not over, and these things need to be looked at no matter what.
Oh, sorry. Mm-hmm. Yes, sorry, I'm trying to get some to the wind up now. Error
No
occurred.
worries. No worries.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's it for the main discussion anyway. I think we covered a lot of really cool things.
Yeah. I really appreciate you inviting me today, and I think we should do this again soon. Sometime.
Yeah, well,
I
we'll
think that would be fun.
or I did run on a lot longer than I was going to in this. I probably won't do a lot of editing on it though. I don't think it's something I could pare down a lot, but I might cut bits at the start and a little bit at the end, just to make sure it's focused on
Sounds
the
good.
discussion. Okay, so I might actually yeah, I'm not sure what Ali's doing, so I might just raid into my friend Yuri Majoram and yeah, see where I'm going from there. I might continue the discussion there. I'm not sure. So let me bring that up. Twitch.tv. Unless there's anyone else on that I want to raid into. Which I don't think so. Demon Mom Alive. Bubs, Bridgie's on.
Here on my end, then, since my capture wasn't as good on my side, I might just end my side of it for now. But if you would like me to,
Yeah, sorry about that. My
you know,
connection is a
stay
bit
on and
surprisingly
join me
shaky
for
today.
more.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'm having difficulties getting, yeah, okay. So I'm going to wrap up the stream here, and I'm getting very stressed actually trying to start this.
That's okay.
So yeah, I'm just going to raid in, and yeah, well, I'll just do some minor editing on this and upload it to YouTube soon. So we will have it there, and that will be that video done. Neo Morai. I probably won't bother with a raid message.
And I see the messages in my chat to go put my mask on because apparently somebody's coughing around me in the library.
Oh no!
So I'm gonna go.
Oh
get
yeah,
that on.
as well, a lot of what you're saying, Jessica Kelgren Fozard, did a lot on this as well.
Yeah, Zan's like playing hard mode.
Sorry, I have okay, that's gone. Yeah, I'd recommend checking her out and some of her videos on it. Oh, okay. Sorry. Apparently we have a browser source now. 1 second. Let's see if this shows up. Okay.
It probably won't on my end, so I might.
That's okay. Yeah, you can head, Tiefy. Thanks for thank you so much for coming. I'll wrap up the stream in a minute.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Okay. Bah, so
Hope to do
cute.
this
Oh, hold
again,
on.
Next time.
I want to do something. I want to hold on. Let me see if I can.
Hey.
I want to like actually pat the Tiefy this time. There we go. Do. Sorry, Evangelist is going to sue me again. Okay,
Let
there
me
we
see
go.
if I can move myself over to get
Oh,
some.
Can I fly you around? Too late. I'm already flying you around. Whee!
And I moved myself over too on my side, but oh well. I
There.
forgot you could do it on your end. Alright.
Yeah, let me put myself above you, and there we go, so I can give you a hug. Let me bring myself up. I'm locked, I think, actually. There we go. Oh, I'm still locked. There we go. If you see face.
And then I'll just give you some head pats on my end.
Thank you.
Wrong button. Of course it is. Okay, there it is. Yay, now you're getting some head pats.
Aw, thank
Yay,
you.
head pats for Rose. Yay.
Yay! And now I'm going to try the thing with the arms again. Pat the Tiefy. Pat the Tiefy. Fly. There we go. Yeah, you're still not showing up though.
Alright, so I'm probably gonna stop
Yeah, I'm
streaming
going
from
to.
my end, but
Yeah, I'm going to wind up too, I think, on my end. So, yeah, I'll see you, TV. Thanks so much for coming.
yeah, no problem. See you next time.
Bye!
Bye.